Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of the Spiritual Inspired Show. I am your host, Claudiu Murgan. For previous episodes, please visit our Hours Network, spiritualinspired.ca, or our YouTube channel. My guest today is Beth Lynch, and we'll talk about grief, our eternal essence, meditation, and more. Beth, thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I would like to start with something that at this point might not be as painful as it was back in 1993 when your mother passed. Were you aware at that time of your gifts, of your skills to hear voices and communicate with the other side?
That's such a great question. I was aware that I would feel things. Maybe I felt deeper than people. Maybe I was overwhelmed a little more. I did question to the universe, God, whoever, my thought was God. Why do I know these things? Why do I feel these things? So I was not aware of the understanding of it by any means. So.
And how did that skill and gift evolve over time? I know your mother talked to you the moment something happened to her. Were you surprised? Did you believe the message?
I actually got so warm when you said that. So, energy, a good warm. Um, I was dreaming and I dreamt that I heard over an intercom system, she was dead. Those were the words. And I saw in the dream gray walls, and I remember seeing people going like running by. And then I woke up. And in the dream, I remember I had been screaming. So when I woke up, I felt very tears were coming down my face. I was very shook. And I looked at the clock and it was 3:15 a.m. And oddly, I said, what kind of dream was that? Went back to sleep, interesting enough. Got up pretty early in the morning and got in the car. And then I turned on the radio and the car, and it was saying the Amtrak had crashed in the middle of the night. And then my whole dream thought came back to me, like, because I was getting my little nephew off to school, so I wasn't really focusing on my dream. I actually forgot, oddly enough. But within moments, so that was then when I heard her voice tell me she was all right, she was happy. And I knew then she must have passed away. So I got pretty shook up. So, I believed it. I didn't want to believe it, but I was definitely believing because I knew between the dream and hearing her voice so clearly, I, was experiencing something like one of those things again, that I would know some. Yeah. Didn't want to
Yes.
know.
Yeah. And in most cases, this type of passings will affect the soul who's going through this process the same way it affects those who stay behind. And they become somehow the spiritual guides of those who are still in 3D. Is that the instance with your mom as well? Is she your guardian angel right now?
I definitely think so. And when I really started to understand those kind of things in the world of grief and healing was I went to a medium a year later with my sister, and we were still grieving. And obviously my dad had passed 3 years before my mother, suddenly too, and a heart attack, that one. But I remember we sat down and the medium looked at me and went, "You're not using your gifts and abilities, young lady. Your mother is telling me from the other side, you're going to do what I do and help people someday." And I'm sitting there in my head going, this lady's crazy. Okay. I was a hairdresser. I was good, busy. And she said, she will guide you. She says she'll guide you to your books and teachers. Now, I did not understand that, but it was a week that I went to a metaphysical shop with crystals and stuff and saw a pamphlet for tarot classes. And I was very intrigued by that. I didn't understand tarot. It was really a spiritual tool. The woman taught me that. But that's where it all started. And I really feel there's been books that have come to me and just in my face. You know what I mean? And I know that's her. I know it's her.
Yeah,
Read this,
beautiful.
Beth. Listen to this, Beth. Go to this, you know. Our
Mom, stop
intuition,
it.
yeah, our intuition becomes part of it. Are we going to trust it and follow it, or are we going to delay it? And I'm not a delayer. I'm one of those. I read someone, someone writes me about I answer. I'm a very I don't procrastination must have been my other lifetime, because it's definitely not this one.
And are you in a similar relationship with your father after he passed and since then, or is just your mom?
My dad was 3 years before. The weird thing about my dad, and we had a very close family. There's four of us, my sister, me, and them, and we always had a very loving family, very connected family. So I know we had that energy between us, but with my dad, I remember feeling like I was getting feelings I was going to die that week. And he had some heart issues, but he wasn't like, sick at the time. And he was young. They were both in their 50s. And I remember thinking, why do I feel death around me? Am I going to die? Is, and I actually said to a friend, we were out on a Saturday night, and I said, I think I got to go talk to a priest or something. That's all I knew, because I was traditionally raised Catholic. And I said, because I feel like I'm being told I'm going to die. She's like, what are you talking about? I go, I don't know. It's what I feel. And Monday morning, the day I would have probably called to make an appointment to talk to somebody, was the morning my dad, he passed away. And
And
my
because
friend said that to me a few weeks later. She goes, do you get those feelings anymore that you're going to die? And I went, oh, I don't. Never had even thought about it. Oh,
interesting.
yeah.
And because you mentioned the Catholic Church, what's your relationship with that religious structure these days?
Well, it's interesting. I don't say I'm this or I'm that. I'm spiritually aware, I think, but I always could feel Jesus. I have stories of speaking with Jesus, being shown things. When I was going sepsis, he showed himself to me and told me to pray and raise, and that was about frequency, because I didn't know I was going sepsis, but I was extremely ill. And that changed the turn of events for that situation. But I've always felt comfortable, but I've come to a very comfortable place with, he was a man who came to teach this, so was Buddha, I mean, I always was raised Catholic, but I always felt Buddhist, but yet I didn't really understand that either, because I wasn't full on, I was young when I was feeling that. And then I've had experiences and healings with the Divine Mother, and have seen miracles for, it wasn't me, it was her presence. And then, whoa, we find out after what took place in the body. So I know they're there. And I have a relationship with them, but it's probably not a traditional relationship, like follow the rules or else.
Yes, these days the Inquisition comes to us in a different format, but on social media, shutting us down and with potential physical harm if we don't keep our mouth shut. But,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
is sometime
Yeah,
in the future, very near future.
yeah. I mean, and we're seeing history. Did history ever not do it? I don't know. It's an interesting topic. Could be a whole nother show, right? But kind of sad to see what we're seeing in the world. But
Yeah. Beth, you are a graduate of Delphi University and have practiced meditation for over 28 years. What's something foundational you learned there that you still teach almost exactly as you first receive it?
I went to Delphi in the early 90s, and at the time I was reading cards, and I remember not really knowing what to expect when I went there, but I knew it was stuff, all that stuff. And the very first evening, they take you on a guided meditation and healing experience. And I was the notorious to say, I can't meditate. I can't stop thinking. I try. I was top of the list there with those comments. And the very first night there, it was just gently guided. And that is something, and I went into an experience. I met a spirit guide. I was the type, I'm sure I got one. I don't need to know who they are. That's just my attitude. I know they're there. Well, I had the experience in the meditative state. Even though I was very aware, I knew I was going through this. And the facilitator, that took us through the journey, said, can I share with you all what I saw? And he looked at me and said, what, my guide in the Indian, and I just burst into tears. The emotion nobody can give you. So that is something, as I practice meditation every day, um, And I teach people and I teach children. I've run meditation rooms in the high school, and that's unbelievable to see. Um, to keep it simple and to just go with it and listen, because you'll get to the vibration. It's really going through the vibration and different frequencies. And I get the hardest ones to meditate.
Yes.
And I
And
say, you don't stop thinking, you slow your thoughts. There's
yeah,
a difference, you know?
yeah. And what do you think will be the best method to introduce meditation in schools, especially in those which are religious schools and like Catholic schools, and they
Mm-hmm.
might collude with this type of
Yeah, I
idea?
know. Well, I have facilitated it for 4 years in a high school. And the reason I did was one of the people in administration, the principal, did 2 personal meditation sessions with me for personal reasons and said, oh my God, I want you in the school. And I go, well, I go to the school and volunteer. Teachers call me, coaches call me when there's tournaments, get the kids, take them through, come talk to them about their breathing. And I would do that quite often, actually. And he said, no, I want you in the school. Like, what can you give me? So I said to him, do you want to call it a mindfulness room just in case? And he said, no, this is meditation. That's the title. We'll deal with it if we get some pushback, right? And one of the most powerful, there were 2 stories, and I did there for 4 years. And the only reason it stopped was COVID. They wouldn't let the kids be in the room. It would fit 15 comfortably. Um, but I remember this young girl, she would come pretty regular. And she said one day, I told, what does that symbol mean? And it was an Om symbol that I had right in the wall. And they let me have low lighting. I diffused oils. I had the music, of course. And then I would guide into their breathing and just guide them into relaxation and a little journey in the heart. I always got that in. And I remember she said, I told my grandmother um, that I was coming here. And she was a Mexican girl. So she was, very traditional. And she says, I told my grandmother I was coming here to meditation. And she said, no, 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 that's the devil. And she goes, but I told my grandmother, and how come I feel God inside me when I'm in the room? And her grandmother went, keep going, keep going. But to hear her explain it with her little accent was just precious. And then there was a young man that he was one of the football players, and he was tall, and he came in angry in the room. I could feel it. He'd never been there before. He didn't want to be in the room, but he came in. I was like, and you sit down because you lay down on a mat usually, and I just said, just follow along. So I start guiding meditation again because they could come in at different times. And he was in there about 15 minutes, and everybody left the room when the bell rang, and he stood in front of me, and I'm looking up at all 6 feet of him, and he goes, Mrs. Lynch, where'd my anger go? Wow. And we don't do this in schools. Why? Call it mindful, call it slow your thought down room, call it chill room, call it something, but get it in the schools. And I know, if you Google it on YouTube, there's inner city schools were doing this, a lot of them eons ago. Now, I don't know if they still are, but I was always like, why aren't these things in schools? And, even in my situation, I could definitely donate some time, but I do this full time. So I needed to, and he even got a grant to give me something to do that. Like
Mm,
a lot of schools don't know that's possible.
yeah. And Beth, I have a name for that to apply to everyone across. Silent rap.
Oh, I love it. I love that. Silent rat. Perfect. It says it all. Right?
They will come for the curiosity of it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, they will. And the thing is, they want it. More than one kid would say, I don't know why they don't teach us this. I go, well, you are being taught it. And I didn't approach it like a class. I approached it as the experience. And that probably answers your question. Bring them into the experience.
Yeah.
They only 5 minutes makes a difference. Most of these kids came in during a lunch break, but some would come after school. One day I was there after school and they would just stay for 45 minutes and let me, bring them into the space and let the music play. And it was just how it isn't in every single school. Bullying would get minimal, because bullies are angry.
Yeah.
And something's missing, right? And they're angry, and they're picking a vulnerable person, usually, because energy, how energy is. I don't think I have to tell you that. They know where to go, and then the bullied go through their own mental health issues, and we could nip a lot of this right in the you know what, if it would just be done.
Yeah. And I'll give you another point then. The bully will have two options: expel for 2 days or sit in meditation for 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, some of them would probably expect. But you know what? I learned through a lot of the kids that they would come to the room. You know what I mean? Because the room made them feel peace inside. The room made them feel, where'd my anger go? I told the kid, when you slow your breathing, and gave him a little crash course before he had to leave the room. And I said, that's all you got to do. He came in the next day with 5 football players, by the way. Brought some of the team in with him.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, and he was consistent. And then, sadly, COVID ended it. We couldn't do it, and it couldn't breathe in the same airspace. And then I moved to Florida, so the room never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pity. So, Beth, you're also an author. You wrote Meditation versus Medication. I
Mm.
wonder who won that contest, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you opening up that latch? I don't know. Um, the it all comes down to Tesla, energy, vibration, frequency. And what I've learned, and I don't know if you read my personal story about the medication, but that was only 2 days, and stopped because I didn't like how I felt, and literally the voices started. So, you know, most people go on the medication because they can't focus or concentrate. Now, I'm about as ADD as they come, but I can tell you, when I was in school, I'm 67, so do the math. How long ago was that? They didn't have a name for it then. They didn't have a name for that. Okay. There were no letters, no names. So I moved through it. And I remember reading something 10 times and not absorbing it, and how frustrating that was, and it was hard. I barely graduated, and I got out, but straight D's. And I remember when I started getting into meditation and really just sitting and doing it for a few minutes a day, and then that I could read things and absorb it. And that shocked me. And I was well into adulthood then. Okay. I was well in my 30s. And I'm like, wow, this fixes that, slows you down, whatever it's doing inside. And so I just, and some of these medications, they create that drop in frequency, which moves you away from your higher vibration or divine energy, or, higher consciousness, so many words we could use. And when we're not connected to our source of intuition and creative expression and communication and coping skills and connectedness, anyone gets depressed. It's common sense, And so, if you meditate a few minutes a day, when you get these kids involved in slowing down instead of everything accelerating them or numbing their emotions that will need to get expressed, and will express it, they'll express it in teens or adulthood. It depends on how old they are when they're put on it, and they're not going to express peacefully. And it's just watch the news. I mean, we're seeing it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of doctors now and psychiatrists actually talking on it, which I've been talking on it for 28 years. And based on my personal experience, that was 38 years before. There was that decade where I didn't know that was my situation, what that would have been, And I was put on it for hyperventilating. I was hyperventilating, couldn't breathe, and went to the ER. So they gave me an anti-anxiety med.
Yeah. And I interviewed a handful of psychiatrists that are bringing new approaches to their practices, even
Oh.
indigenous approaches. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I put them in my book, The Light Within the Mind, because they're different. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for something like that so people can hear, learn about them and use their services. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big proponent of alternative methods of healing. And that's why when I meet a doctor, all I want him to do is to listen and open up his mind to new modalities. I know it's scary because he got that piece of paper that mentions that he's a doctor and he's afraid that he might lose his license.
Hmm.
But if he really cares about humanity and his brothers and sisters, he should listen and look into, again, other modalities.
I had a heart doctor. Well, I didn't know he was a heart doctor. He came, I was running a retreat called the Inner Light Awareness, which is a healing modality kind of downloaded to me um, when I had just had my son. I wanted to do hands-on healing as well as readings, but I didn't have the time or the money to go do it. And he was a newborn when I started thinking about it. And these little things started downloading. And one day I looked, I go, my God, I put together a healing. This is a healing. I realized it. And that same day, someone called me, do you do Reiki? And I go, well, I can't lie. It's not Reiki because I had never done Reiki. I'd heard of it, but I'd never done it. So I said, well, no, I don't do Reiki, but I do hands-on healing. Oh, okay. I'd like to make an appointment. And the rest was history. I mean, that was like my biggest sign that I did download a healing. But so I teach the program as well. I still teach it. And this girl, a friend was coming to one of my retreat weekends and she said, can I bring my boyfriend? He wanted to be with me this weekend and he's willing to come. I go, sure, bring him along. So he came and I didn't know anything about him. I'd never met him before. So we go through it was a full day, 6 hours, 7 hours. And we go through it and he had a very profound experience with his dad in spirit when he was receiving healing, and he was sharing that with us. He was very emotional, and so at the end, I do a little message for everybody, and I looked at him. I go, I don't know what you do, but you're going to take what you experienced today and bring it into your work or your business, and I go, you're really going to stand out. Now this was like 25 years ago. I go, you're going to stand out differently. Your work's going to grow because you apply, whether it's this. I go, what do you do? And he goes, I'm a cardiologist. Everybody in the room just dropped their jaw. Like, we're like, oh. And he goes, I learned more about the human heart today than I did in med school. And we were all just, I think we all had tears in our eyes because it was such a beautiful, and it's really just about going into the heart chakra, let it all, start from there and what goes from there. A lot of healings. There's other modalities that do that too, that certainly. But wow, to hear that from when he said that, every single one of them, I'm glad I didn't know. You know what I mean? I was glad I didn't know what he did before. And then to hear that at the end, it was just like,
Yeah. And there are doctors out there who are very curious, not too many, but there are a few who are curious about what's out there. And they try ayahuasca, they try mushrooms, they try Reiki. They go and experiment to see how it is, and for themselves and for their practice. And I would love to see more and more of them, breaking these professional barriers and find out more.
Mm-hmm. And then there was I knew some people who they monitored the mental health clinic in the area that I was in at the time, and they said, "Would you come and do meditation maybe once a month or a couple times a month?" And I said, "Sure, I'll come." So I would go, and these people were amazing. And I can't tell you, by the time I did it for 2 years, and I always remember how they would come up to me and give me like little quotes of things I said in the meditation that I didn't even realize, And then they started coming up and saying, just guess what? I'm only on 3 meds now, not 8, because I feel better. And I remember some of them saying, I'm only on 1 medication now. I don't need my sleep meds. I don't need the anxiety meds anymore. And I'm sure they had to wean them very carefully and safely. But to watch these people who were apparently challenged mentally and emotionally, that was their clubhouse place they would go to every day, go through such a transformation. It makes you want to cry. Like, why aren't these things? These should be front and center.
Yes, I think most of what we consider disease can be reversed through meditation, through, psilocybin, through any other modalities, through plasma energy or technology.
Mm-hmm.
Something can be found for these people. It's just the system that
Mm-hmm.
prevents us and the society to help them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Beth, you said that the misunderstanding of spirituality has created a great divide in the world, spiritually, politically, in every area, and
Mm-hmm.
you can prove it. Can you walk us through what that proof actually looks like?
Mm-hmm. And to do that, we have to begin with, what does spiritual really mean? What is spirituality? You know what I mean? I think when I became looking at it from that angle, that's where this really made sense. And I always break it down to people like this. When you understand the spiritual nature, we're spiritual beings and human beings. This is not an argument I'm going to get into with anybody, but we are energy and we are physical. Okay, for the science buffs. Okay, and it's true, right? It's true. We're energy. Energy never dies. It's blah, blah, blah. And then you go back to the quote of Nikola Tesla. You want to understand the secrets of mental health. You want to understand the secrets of, war and healing, everything. Think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. He just said secrets of the universe, but it encompasses all of it. And so if you think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency, and you break it down into the spirit, your spirit is your highest frequency of your consciousness. It's connected up there. It's right here around us. It's perspective. Everything's right there. So you have a spiritual nature, which is intuitive, and intuition is a survival mechanism. It is not just the connection to the divine or the universe. It is that as well. So you've got two things that the intuitive nature does that is in the spiritual nature. Very important to function as a human being, to trust intuition, to survive down here, right? And just survival, not scary things, anything, eat, food, whatever. And then you have creative energy that runs through the soul or the spirit into the consciousness of us as human beings, and that's how we express things. And when we're expressing our creative abilities, we're hopefully, that's how we're receiving the exchange of the energy of finance as well, because that's something we need to survive here, unless you know how to live off the grid, which I don't. So you have intuitive nature, your creative nature, you have how you cope emotionally. Our personalities, they'll hit the ground running. Okay, they'll dig the hole deeper. But our spirit truly understands. When you think of the quote, on earth as it is in heaven, in the Lord's Prayer, do you have to go any further with that prayer? No. See, I tell people when they're using mantras for coping skills, I'll say, just say, I want to see this on earth as I do in heaven. And write that down and use that mantra, because you are saying, I'm choosing to see from the higher vibration. I'm choosing to see from spirit, my spiritual side. So you have the spiritual nature, the creative nature, the coping skills, the compassion. Patience run out. Humans, there's no patience. Just drive on the road. No patience. Compassion will not run out. We've had some great teachers show us that. I don't think I need to list them. Compassion for people. Then you have how you communicate. Well, it's not the technology that's hurting us. It's how we're using the technology. That's that corner. So how we communicate is so important, and that's in our spirit. And then the connectedness, how we feel, how we draw to each other just to speak and put it out there to help others, right? It's all a connection that draws us magnetically through that beautiful law of attraction that is emotional. It is magnetic. It does not think. We are the thinking behind it. We are the intelligence behind the law. So when you have a human being exempt from all that, we're not looking at too many happy people who don't trust their intuition, who do not feel like they can create and be expressive and know how to communicate. Just check the list with people struggling the most. And then where the medication came in was that vibration drops us from those that's how I was told. The frequencies drop too low, and sometimes like a roller coaster. And the separation happens. The conscious, the spirit, and the self. The self, I call that the personality. And in my episode that I had 38 years ago, before I understood any of this, I was still foiling hair and doing my thing. Right before I started to hear voices to unalive myself, which I hadn't ever thought. I was just 28 figuring out life, and but I hyperventilated, which was a response of my body to some of the stressor. Obviously, that's, I think, common sense. It makes sense now. It didn't at the time. But right before, and I had stopped taking that medication the day before, the 24 hours prior, and I had only had 3 in my system, one from the ER, one in the morning, one at bedtime, and I did not like how I felt. I felt weird. I felt off. I said, throw that out. I ain't taking that stuff. And then I made some big decisions in that 24 hours, and then I started to feel weird. And right after I started to feel weird again, like off and a little distorted, I saw a hologram of myself walk by, go once, and then went back. I did not know that was my higher consciousness at the time. I didn't know the terminology. I didn't have an understanding. And then right at the second one, that's when the voices started, because my spirit left my body because the frequency was too low. And when the frequency in a body is low, it's shutting down, usually. Physical death. What happens? The spirit leaves. But when you're in that kind of zone, you're still a physical being, able to do things, function, motor skills are there, Yeah. And that's the out of body that I talk about.
Yeah. And, we have means, as you mentioned, to bring the students into a meditation class. They will come, even if they are forced, they will come, they will enjoy it, they will keep coming. But what do you suggest? And this is a very serious question. What do you suggest we can do to those at the top position, politicians especially, who seems that they have no more souls? They act from a totally different angle, that doesn't care about us anymore. How can we face them with this option of bettering themselves, of meditation, of doing something to regain their soul and consciousness?
Yeah, such a good question. Look, I wish I had the black and white answer or the simple answer. All I can do is hope that people like ourselves, people who, the greatest of teachers in spirituality and consciousness, if they would just read the books, or, when you look at what my principal did of the high school, he applied for a grant and got it. He got his grant writer to get it in there. So as the higher ups do it, but how do we get those people to understand it? That all we can do is keep it out there in the world and hope that one of them reads a darn book or something that opens their, consciousness, or comes across a YouTube. I mean, really, can you propose, plans? Can you go stand in front of them? And, it's interesting that you asked that, because I had a moment where I thought of something when you were talking, and I was asked once to speak in front of a room of doctors and all medical people, at a hospital. And it was actually a nursing home that I was going and doing, kind of like the mental health clinic, only this was a nursing home, long-term nursing care. And I would go in and do meditation with the patients. They were amazing. And I'll never forget walking in that room, and there was probably about 50 of them in there. So the girl that knew me said, I want you to come and just talk to the doctors and the therapists about meditation. Look at the room, look at the people you're working with and how they're responding, and they're calm now, and they're sleeping, and they're telling me they don't want their medicine. Like, I know, that's scary, right? But it's true. That's what happens. So I remember walking in, it was so icy. They did not want to be there. They didn't want to hear this girl who didn't have any degree or PhD or B or C talking to them. And I could feel the energy, boy. I'm like, okay, I'll get them.
As long as they didn't have rotten tomatoes on them, that was fine.
No, there was no tomatoes. Might have been a few pens that could have came. But I'll tell you, I do the little talk about understanding consciousness, and by little, keep that brief, take them through the experience. 15 minutes maybe, tell them put their hands down and lay on the desk if they want, or just close their eyes. You get done with that, and the whole energy changes. They are asking questions. And how come I felt so anxious when I walked in here? And I go, that's a vibrational response to a higher frequency, merging with not that your low frequency is bad. Low frequency isn't bad. We are humans. There is a low frequency, we would call the evil, I would, that is so low and so exempt. And we don't, the news will share that with you. But yeah, and it was interesting just to watch them change. And I've had a lot of experiences with that. And it's magical, I think. It is, because once they feel the difference in the vibration and you show them that difference, they're putty in your hands for the right reason. And all you can do is hope they take it out and use it on their patients. Well, why don't you try this? I have therapists that send me clients. It's usually going to be affiliated to the grief area, but they've come to me for their own loss of people and know how it helped them. And, people will tell me, oh, my therapist sent me. And I'm like, really? Wow. Thank you. To thank them for me. And, I don't always know who it is because I got people everywhere. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's just, I guess it's just keep knocking on the doors, get it out on the airwaves. And that's what we can do. That answers that question.
Yes. Beth, thank you very much for everything you shared. Do you want to mention anything else about your programs and your process?
No, just that I am I do this work remotely, a lot of my work in person if you're in the Florida Treasure Coast area, and I'm available for sessions. I do all kinds of sessions, whether it's personalized meditation, the channeling of loved ones for grief, you name it, I do it. I teach energy awareness, and I do have an event coming up July 23rd, virtual, called Spirit Speaks, where I take everybody through a little chat and then give messages. That's usually, I run one of those every couple of years. Everything's on my website, innerlightteaching.com. And you can find that there, and just, hopefully I can help.
Perfect. We'll post all these links in the description. Thank you very much for everything you do.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, leave a comment. And until next time, love and gratitude.